I just got done watching all 6 episodes of the new Vince McMahon documentary on Netflix, and I just wanted to hop on here and give some quick thoughts and opinions. I just took some notes while watching it, and just giving my thoughts overall about the documentary, what I thought, is it worth watching for fans of wrestling and for non-fans of wrestling. Just a bit of housekeeping first. I know most people will be going into the documentary looking to see what information is brought up about the ongoing Janelle Grant lawsuit that Vince is involved in. And I just think it's worth noting that that is an ongoing investigation, and that is an ongoing trial. So any information brought up in the documentary or even presented by myself could be outdated by the time you watch the documentary. New information could come out that could affect the trial, etc. and stuff like that. So it's just worth noting that that case is an ongoing investigation. So did I enjoy the documentary? Overall, as a big wrestling fan, yeah, I did enjoy it. It's short enough. Each episode's only about 50 minutes long, and there's only 6 episodes. So you can bang it out in a day or just spread it over a few days if you want. There wasn't much new information I found personally as a wrestling fan. I was surprised by how much I thought going into this, and I think most people thought going into this was going to be a hit piece. But this documentary, 90% of it was filmed before most of the current allegations against Vince came out. So most of it, even the first 4 episodes especially, it's just kind of a historical piece. It kind of guides you through Vince's relationship with his father and taking over the company and taking over the territories and the rise of Hulk Hogan, Hulkamania up to the Attitude Era and stuff like that. So it's just kind of a history piece, which for wrestling fans, we already know that stuff that they're going to cover. And for non-wrestling fans, I think the pull for them to watch this was the expose on Vince, and I don't know if they care about the history of the WWE, WWF. Now, I know that's not the documentary maker's fault. That's not Netflix's fault. They're just doing the documentary that they were hired to do, and then this lawsuit happened to come out, so they had to kind of pivot course. Towards the end of the documentary, there is a good maybe half an hour given to the Janelle Grant case and the allegations against Vince. Interestingly enough, actually, Vince refused to come back for the final interviews for the documentary after the allegations were made public, so make of that what you will. But in terms of the new stuff I learned in regards to Vince, in terms of kind of some of the scandals he's been involved with, I knew about the steroid trial and the current sexual allegations against him, and the stuff with the Ring Boys and the scandal involving them, the Pat Patterson stuff with the abuse, the sexual abuse that was going on in the kind of 80s to early 90s WWF with the Ring Boys and stuff like that. But the one new thing I learned was that I didn't notice that Vince was actually accused of rape in the late 80s, early 90s by a female referee in the WWF at the time. And this lady, she went on national television, she kind of poured her heart out, she quit the company, and it didn't seem like it got the attention it deserved. I mean, I didn't even know about it, and I'm a huge fan. So I was kind of surprised by that. Like, how did we not... Now, obviously people knew about it, Meltzer kind of commented on it, the wrestling journalist commented on it, but this seemed to have been swept under the rug for years, and this was a big case. She claimed Vince raped her, like very serious allegations. She quit the company, and Vince denied it, of course. But there was a little note in the documentary saying that in 2022, 2023, I believe, the statute of limitations on the case was briefly lifted, and Vince did have to settle and pay out to this woman. So, that kind of tells the whole story. Vince makes a comment. At one point, the producers ask him, did he have sexual relations unconsensual with this woman? Vince denies it, and then he makes this wild claim that even if he did rape this lady, that the statute of limitations on the case had ran out, so nothing will come of it. It's crazy. Like, he's talking about kind of just using very strange language to kind of, you are denying that you did it, but you're coming across so blasé and not caring and not giving a fuck, about these accusations that are really serious. And then even if they are real, well, I'm kind of immune to it. I just thought that was wild. That kind of moves on to my next point, that everyone in this documentary comes across fine, I think. Most people, except 2. Most of this was filmed before the allegations against Vince came out. They're very clear about that, when each interview was filmed, 2021, 2022, or before. So, a lot of people that appear, The Undertaker, Rock, Cena, Booker T, like, they don't, completely slate Vince. They just kind of say the usual rhetoric we hear about Vince. He's a father figure to me. he defined sports entertainment, etc. But the two people that come across so delusional the whole time are Vince himself and Hulk Hogan. Some of the claims they make are just so, like, it comes across that they're trying to brag, but it just really kind of incriminates themselves. Not incriminates, that's the wrong word, but just makes them look like an asshole and so self-entitled. At one point, Hogan is talking about, around WrestleMania 2, Jesse Ventura wanted to unionize, and that he was trying to rally the troops in the locker room and, you know, get everyone to walk out on Vince, or if he doesn't give us a union and stuff. And, you know, as wrestling fans, we know the story that Hogan went to Vince, ratted Jesse Ventura out, and basically that kind of put a stop to that. And Hogan comes across in the documentary as if that was that was a real good thing. I'm on Vince's side. I'm kind of a team player. You know, I saved Vince from that. And he's so proud of it. He just comes across so cocky. There's at another point in the documentary, they're on about Vince leaving WWE and will WWE ever be able to survive without Vince in the future. And Hogan is just kind of so dead serious. No, like, I think the companies will fail without Vince. And it's just, and that was recorded before, obviously, all the current success with Triple H running the company and stuff. But even before Triple H took over and we saw the current success, that's just such a crazy claim. I think nobody thought that when Vince leaves WWE, that's it. Like, it's gonna just completely collapse from there on out. I think we all thought, we didn't think it was gonna be this successful, but surely, you know, it couldn't go downhill. It could only go up from here. And Vince just comes across like a psycho. At one point, he says that he has in his head, his brain is like 2 or 3 computers running at once, and the answers he gives you could be computer number 1. So the answers he gives you at this time could be saying one thing, but computer number 2 or 3 is running different stuff in the background. And then the producer asks him, well, what's computer number 2 saying to you right now? You know, what's it kind of thinking up right now? And Vince just says, oh, it's talking about fun sex stuff. And I mean, that's just, it's just so weird. It's so out of left field. It just seems like Vince is, you know, the producers are steering him one direction, talking one thing, and he just wants to talk about sex. And there's a lot of that in this documentary. Vince just seemed so sexually driven throughout his whole life. He just, obviously, we got these current allegations. There was allegations in the 90s. There was loads of allegations before Janelle Grant in like 2022. There's loads of people he paid off. They show some of the text messages that Vince sent to Janelle Grant, which, you know, you can look them up yourselves. They're just kind of, they're tough to read. They're so just kind of derogatory. So just disgusting, a lot of some of the stuff he says in there. And Vince tries to play it off like, you know, what I got from it was the Vince McMahon, the Mr. McMahon character we've seen on television was kind of the real sexual desires and stuff of Vince coming to the forefront. You know, the stuff he did with Trish Stratus as his girlfriend. He wanted to do a storyline with Stephanie, impregnating Stephanie. He obviously degraded a lot of women in storyline and stuff like that. And they even get Trish and people in the documentary to say, look, that's part of the storyline. That wasn't actually Vince. That's, you know, we were happy to do it to draw money. And that's fair enough. Like, that's their decision. If they were happy to go along and be filmed in part of that storyline, that's whatever, that's their decision. But it really just, when you're playing the clip side by side of Vince talking about this and then the Mr. McMahon character, it just kind of gave me this vibes that Vince really was like that Mr. McMahon character, especially in terms of the weird sex stuff. And it was his way of getting to live out some of those fantasies publicly. And that ties into another thing I've got here in my notes, that at one point the producer asked Vince, is he like his, you know, fictional character on TV? And Vince just says, no, I'm nothing like him. And then it cuts, it's really kind of, it's almost comedic, it cuts to a series of like other wrestlers, talent, and people who work for Vince, and they're basically like, yeah, Vince behind the scenes is pretty much exactly what you see is what you get. And it just kind of goes to show, you know, a theme throughout the whole documentary that I got was that Vince was just delusional, and he was so out of touch with what he thought was reality. I think he genuinely thinks that the Vince McMahon businessman who ran the company and the character he played on screen was like vastly different, and like, oh, it's just acting, it's just, you know, it's entertainment, as he'd say. But it doesn't seem like that at all. It seems like they were the exact same person. And in terms of non-wrestling fans watching this documentary, I think that will be the most interesting part to them. It's Vince the scandals that Vince was involved in, the steroid trials and obviously the sexual misconduct trials and the stuff that he was doing behind the scenes to kind of get ahead of the competition and overthrow his father and being WCW. That'll be the part that I think will draw non-wrestling fans in, but there's not as much as you'd think. I think it's kind of like 70-30, 80-20 that, and the rest is kind of stuff they won't care about. I just know most average people are not going into the kind of with the rise of Hulk Hogan and stuff like that. Another thing I found fascinating in the documentary was so many wrestlers, especially at the beginning, the kind of old-timers, I suppose, the Jimmy Harts, Hogans, Vinces and stuff like that. They're kind of obsessed with reiterating this, it was a different time mentality. And even Bret Hart at one point says it. Shawn Michaels at one point says it. It seems like the documentary is almost edited in a way that they're portraying it as, the values of women weren't as featured much and steroids were okay and, stuff went on behind the scenes. And they were like, that was just a different time, a different world we lived in. But you just get this sense that they're covering up something they know. Not that they know the extent of everything that's going on, but it just seems like they were okay with, that was a different time, so obviously shady stuff went on, and we wouldn't do that now. We know it's not okay now, but it was a different time. Just kind of that shrug of, we didn't know any better. And they never kind of button it with we should have known better, or how would you describe it? Or, it was a different time, and it's a shame it was a different time because ... It just kind of is and I just felt like that was strange because I know they were making reference to that in the fact of the kind of what we seen on screen, it was a different time, but you could just got this air throughout the documentary. They were also almost saying, it was okay, but it was not okay. Stuff that was going on behind the scenes, it was a different time, so that was okay. One person I think was a standout from the whole piece was Tony Atlas. I feel like they got some great sound bites from him. He's very articulate, and he's just so sharp. If you've ever watched WWE Legends House, they kind of portray Tony Atlas as being a bit of an old goof or something like that. But this, really made you realize that he was so clued in, and he gives some of the most honest. I felt like he got nothing to lose. Everyone that came on this was, even before the Vince allegations, they were still very, reserved and, yes, Vince is a bad guy, but, you can't get ahead of business if you're not a bad guy or cutthroat. But Tony Atlas was just straight up, you'll get fired if you go tell Vince about the stuff you've seen, or, if you leak stuff to the press or steroids or the Ring Boy scandal or anything like that. Tony Atlas was so, cut and dry with his answers, and which I thought was great. I think he should, he got your money's worth of Tony Atlas in this. He was a standout of the documentary, I felt. At one point, Stone Cold Steve Austin, who we love Austin, the whole documentary was fine. But they get into a section of the documentary about Chris Benoit and about, can you separate the monster from the artist, and was it steroids that led to this? And then they bring in Chris Nowinski to talk about the CTE and the concussions and stuff. And at one point, Austin just says something, he said, I'm not a CTE guy, I just don't believe in it. And I don't know if it's edited to make it look this way. Is Austin saying, I don't believe in it, that CTE was the reason Benoit did that? Because that's an opinion. But if it's how I took it, was that Austin I don't believe concussions and trauma over time and brain injuries and stuff can lead to all these things that science and, the medical field have discovered. It's, it's science, it's clear, it's fact. I think that was a bad take from Austin. It just makes him look, how can you deny the facts? It's been well documented and well proven that repeated knocks to the brain, trauma to the brain, concussions, whether it's in NFL or wrestling or any kind of impact sport, leads to long-term brain damage and brain issues, and that can lead to dementia and etc. etc. So I just thought that was a real bad take from Austin. I don't know whether it's edited weirdly or if that's his opinion. I disagree. The documentary does go into and names Brock Lesnar as that unnamed wrestler who was involved with a lot of the Vince McMahon, the Janelle Grant lawsuit. That's been pretty much confirmed at this stage, and we know that, but it was just, I was wondering, would they, the fact that it hasn't been 100% concrete and got to court, etc., would they name Lesnar? But they did. So, make of that what you will. It'd be interesting to see if it ever does go to trial, what will happen with Lesnar, and will he be lumped in with Vince and tried to the same extent, or I don't know. It'd be interesting to see. Towards the end of the documentary, the producer asked a question to a lot of people what do you think Vince's legacy is going to be? And nobody can answer it. Everyone just kind of hums and ahs and dodges the question. And the only one that does answer it is Tony Atlas, who says Vince's legacy is he's going to go down as the greatest promoter of all time, which that was actually recorded before all these allegations came out. So I don't think that's no longer true. I think Vince's legacy would have been greatest promoter of all time. Wrestling wouldn't be where it is without him, etc. But he had a lot of behind the scenes stuff, shady dealings that, he wouldn't want people to know about. But now I think it's gone the other way. I think first and foremost, Vince will be remembered as a sexual predator who, used his position, his money, his power to kind of take advantage of people and just kind of do some really awful things for years and swept it under the rug. And he'll go down as a really shady businessman, shady person who had very flexible morals, who did stuff to get him ahead in the business world and his personal world, and just, used his power to kind of dangle a carrot in front of people to give them jobs, promotions, more money, and used sexual favors as a way to get that. I think that's what Vince will be remembered for. And then at the underneath that, it'll be like, and he created a wrestling blah, blah, blah. I think that's just the way it's going to go down. They do show, which is nice, that WWE is kind of now thriving without Vince. They show clips of WrestleMania 40 and how good the business is doing. The Triple H talking about money's up, attendance is up, the best the business has seen in 20 years and stuff, which I think is nice because, with the Netflix deal and stuff like that, I suppose it's a good time to be a wrestling fan, and that bit of hope at the end, to you kind of leave it on a slight uplifting note that the wrestling is in a good place. WWE will not be defined by Vince McMahon. There is life after Vince McMahon, and it's nice to kind of separate the two and be like, one's going this direction, we're going on the up and up, we're in a good trajectory, and we're kind of leaving Vince behind to, deal with his mess that he caused. To sum it up, I do think it's worth a watch, especially if you're a wrestling fan. I think there's a bit here you'll take from it, and everyone's going to be talking about it, so, it's worth not being left out of the discussion. If you're not a wrestling fan, I don't know. I think you can kind of get all the information you need about the bits that will compel you to watch this in the first place. Most non-wrestling fans will become drawn to this, to the scandals and stuff, especially the current scandals, the sexual allegation scandals. And that's all out there. That's on every website, every YouTube video, you'll want. There's nothing new there in terms of that. If you, as a non-wrestling fan, if you want a quick kind of snapshot of, Vince McMahon's life, what he built, and how it all kind of came crumbling down for him personally, it's all there. You're kind of, you'll get the kind of synopsis of starting the company, grew the company, and then he kind of lost his own. He didn't lose his company, but he lost the run himself and completely kind of has ruined his legacy now. So, but I do actually think it's more of a documentary for actual wrestling fans than non-fans. I just feel the overemphasis on the historical part at the beginning of the kind of few episodes, I think could lose people that aren't diehard wrestling fans. Again, that's not the documentary maker's fault. That's obviously, they weren't making a hit piece. They weren't making a hit piece. They weren't making a documentary about Vince McMahon, the sexual predator, and the allegation that came out in 2024. They were making a documentary about the history kind of at the WWE and its owner and kind of some of the shady but unconfirmed dealings he had done. But now it kind of has to shift direction. I feel like this documentary would have appealed more to the public if it had come out a year or 2 years later, and you kind of had a bit more of the fallout from what Vince did and the current ongoing allegations, and if that case had finished up, what the verdict would be. It'd be interesting to see in the coming weeks, months, years, etc. What happens to Vince? Will it go to trial? Will the case go to trial? Will he go to prison? And more allegations come out? Will he be proven innocent? I don't think so. In this case, there's so much evidence against him that watch the documentary, you'll see there's just no chance. But you gotta let the justice system kind of run its course there. I'd be interested to see the reaction within WWE and the wrestling community. I don't think it's a big enough bombshell of a piece that'll rock the world. I think people in WWE, I don't know whether it'll be a comment. I think it'll be an behind the scenes kind of, okay, look, let's hope we can just close that chapter of the company's history and move on with things. But an interesting watch for sure. And so it's just interesting timing, WWE moving to Netflix, we're all going to Netflix and stuff like that. It's just kind of, funny how that happened to line up with this coming out just months before then. So, interesting relationship start between WWE and Netflix. But what did you think of the documentary? Did you get a chance to watch it? If you enjoyed it, if you hated it, any thoughts on what you saw, and thoughts on Vince, thoughts on anyone in the documentary? I'd like to hear what you think in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching. I've been Cormac, and I'll see you around.